everyone. Here's the final recap for this excellent series that we've gone through called Unstoppable. Looking from Genesis to Revelation to see how our God really is unstoppable. And there's no person and no thing that can get in the way of him accomplishing his purposes. And so last night, we ended the series by looking at the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And there were really two questions that I challenged us to think about. The first is this: do we really believe that the resurrection happened? And if we do believe, how does that change the way that we live our lives? So I had to think about these questions, and ultimately, I've come to the conclusion, I can't make this conclusion for everyone else, but we as followers of Christ have come to the conclusion, if we put our faith and trust in Christ, that yes, indeed, Christ did rise from the dead. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, which is primarily where we looked at last night, said this: that if the resurrection of the dead is not possible, if Christ has not risen from the dead, then we of all people are most to be pitied because we're fools. And everything that, Paul said, everything that we've said to you, to the church in Corinth, all of it's a lie and you can disregard it because the dead are not raised. But he ends in verse 15, he ends that kind of section and says, but indeed, Christ has been raised from the dead. And I believe that that's true. And I believe it's not just, there's actually evidence not just in the Bible, but even outside the Bible, that would suggest that that is indeed the reality, that Christ has risen from the dead. And so even death, the final enemy, the strongest enemy that we know in this life, has been defeated and could not contain our unstoppable God. And that's the good news for us. We talked about if Christ just died on the cross, and that was it, he just stayed dead, did not rise again 3 days later. As Paul said, we're foolish, and you can disregard everything. You might as well stop coming to Grace and meeting and youth group. There's no reason for us to do that because Christ has not been raised. But I use this analogy, and hopefully it's helpful. It was helpful, maybe not. But think of the cross as Jesus writing the check to pay our debt of sin, right? As the price that needed to be paid, shed blood on the cross. He wrote the check, and the resurrection is the check clearing. Or think of it like a credit card. You go to the store, you have the card, Jesus has the card, he takes the card, swipes it, and it's accepted. Right? His sacrifice was accepted by God on our behalf. And that's the hope that we have in the gospel, that Christ didn't just stay dead, but rose again 3 days later, just as it was prophesied that he said, as it said he would, and just as he said he would. He rose again from the grave. And that changes everything. And so I encourage you and invite you as a family to answer those two questions. Do you really believe that the resurrection happened? If so, how does that change your life? Maybe look at Revelation 21 and look at what the resurrection has purchased for us, the hope that we have in the new heaven and the new earth, and how awesome that all really is. But again, I'm so excited to go through this series, and it's sad that it's ending, but we're excited for what's coming up. And what's coming up at Christmas, we're going to start a series called Emmanuel. He dwelt among us, and we're going to be we're going to be hearing from some of the leaders, hearing their stories, how God has walked with them, and look at what it really means for us that God dwelt among us and lived among us and came into the world. So we're excited for that, excited for all that God has done and will continue to do in and through our lives as we learn his word together and hear his gospel proclaimed together. Hope that you are encouraged and hope that you have a great day.